VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker, and we are coming up on the start of training camp Sunday. Rookies report to Egan, and then 2 days after that, veterans show up. So the party is getting cracking. We need some positivity and on-the-field footage of these Vikings because the last couple of weeks have been pretty rotten, whether it is the death of Kyrie Jackson, Jordan Addison's shenanigans, or the quarterback and the edge rusher from the first round not yet signed, and then therefore some suspense on whether or not that happens. I think it will before training camp. So we had like this honeymoon phase of all of the young guys, all of the change in the offseason, and that has had the brakes pumped in the last couple weeks with some of this, like, what's going on here, fellas? But I expect everybody to get excited once again with training camp, and then the preseason is right around the bend. It's sneaky close, I should say. But what I want to do is I don't want to go like too pessimistic, but I want to warn the group here about some of the problems facing the Vikings, which is basically an explanation of why this team isn't slated to make a big playoff or Super Bowl push. This is kind of new territory. This is the first time since arguably 2015 that the Vikings don't profess that they're all in for a Super Bowl. I think this is kind of an accepted, at least from a fan's perspective, that this season is a transformational year to figure out, all right, is the quarterback good? Is 2025 when things can really heat up and these Vikings can be contenders? So these 5 things, the problem, so to speak, will kind of explain why sports books believe the Vikings will win 6-7 games. Aaron Schatz was on with us, and me and Yannick and I on Monday, and he said 7 or 8 wins, and that's kind of what the body politic of the NFL says. So I'm going to, per usual, when I'm standalone shows by myself, I'm going to start at the bottom of the list, and I'll work our way up to the top mystery, which is like the big kahuna of them all. At number 5, kind of a spoiler alert that I gave a moment ago. Number 5 is the start of season fate or fates of TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. So we were told, rightfully so, for, my goodness, 6 months of this offseason, that the weaponry, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, any quarterback that comes to this team is going to thrive. Wouldn't you know it, Sam Darnold showed up in March. We're hoping he can be a reclamation project, and then J.J. McCarthy was drafted in April. Well, the problem, if T.J. Hawkinson, who is still recovering from a torn ACL that he suffered against the Lions in December, and then Addison, who might be facing a suspension for whatever is mitigated or litigated out of his California tomfoolery, you went from saying, all right, Sam Darnold's finally going to get his chance with a geographical cure to do the thing. He's got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. Well, you're looking at the start of the season, he's got Justin Jefferson, Brandon Powell, and Robert Tonyan. And that is substantially different than Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson. So at least to start the season, and I'm going to get to the schedule here in a minute, you don't want to have a bunch of diminished weaponry for a large unknown at the quarterback position. It's unknown because we don't actually know if Sam Darnold will have a lot of justice and finally be great, or if McCarthy finds a way to score the upset this summer. You would think he'd want Hawkinson and Addison, who are trending, I think, probably not to be available against the Giants on September 8th, which is suddenly about 50 days away. So one of the top problems, in my estimation, is all of these glorious playmakers that we've daydreamed about. Well, Hawkinson and Addison may not be there for an indefinite period at the start of the season, and to me, that's a large problem. Thankfully, we don't have these ginormous Super Bowl stakes, so if both guys aren't available week 1, we're kind of like, oh yeah, well, good thing we didn't think we were going to win it all this year. Number 4, you got to follow me here on the logic for a minute, is the turnover malady, the turnover problem. So in 2022, Kevin O'Connell's first year, the Vikings' turnover differential and their wherewithal to force turnovers was pretty sweet. That's why they went 13-4. Fast forward to his second year, and all of the fumbles in the first quarter, all of the fumbles on the opening drive, they fundamentally screwed up everything the Vikings tried to do last year. In fact, they ranked second worst in the NFL per giveaways, which are interceptions and fumbles to the other team. and then second to worst in the turnover differential. Correspondingly, the Vikings had a losing season and were on the outside looking in for the postseason contention. Now, I've said on this show, and I tweeted once or twice this offseason, that when the Kevin O'Connell brand of football, 2 seasons, when his team wins the turnover battle or they break even, they are 17-0. They are undefeated. They are the 2007 Patriots when they protect the football. When the turnover differential, the turnover battle, when that's upside down for the Vikings, when they're -1 or lower, they are 3-14. They turn into the team who's going to get the first overall draft pick. So it's easy to say, well, it's going to be a point of emphasis, baby. They're going to fix the turnovers. Great. They'll probably improve. But your solution this offseason at quarterback, at least for the patch-over quarterback, is Sam Darnold. And the only real knock on Sam Darnold is that he turns over the ball too much, interceptions and fumbles. So you're coming off a season where 2 turnovers ruined everything. You preach that you're going to fix that the following season, and then you bring a quarterback who's known for turnovers. I don't like that mix. I hope that Darnold is cured by Kevin O'Connell and Josh McCown, but it's an odd situation for me that the way we currently observe Vikings football, it's so dependent on turnovers, at least the outcome, and the guy that you're probably going to trot out and start, for the most part, has been a turnover machine in his 6 seasons. So that's a problem for me. We will hope in our rosiest forecast that Darnold is fixed and everything will be fine, but you actually have to see that first to believe it. Number 3, the schedule to start the season for the first 8 weeks is brutal. There's no other way to dice it. It's kind of like last year for week 1 purposes. You might remember when we looked at the schedule, it looked like it was going to be really tough, but at least we played the Buccaneers out of the gate. They weren't supposed to be very good. On people's power rankings last year, they were a bottom 7 team or so. They ended up making the postseason, and of course, they beat the Vikings in week 1. So I'm trying to warm up to the Giants being a win for the Vikings in week 1, but because I have that sour taste in my mouth based on the Buccaneers, I don't know if I can profess that. I'll do it when I get closer to the season. But the start of the season is this: at New York Giants, not like a gimme, at home against the 49ers, at home against the Texans, at the Green Bay Packers, in London against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, at home against the Lions, on the road Thursday Night Football at the Rams. There is not a single easy game there in the schedule. If Kirk Cousins was re-signed and we had these pseudo Super Bowl stakes, I'd still say, God, if you can escape this damn thing at 2-3 or 3-4, you're going to feel great. But we have quarterback instability. We have the end of the competitive rebuild and the product of what we think will work. But you're hopping out to this start with either a rookie quarterback in McCarthy or an unknown at Darnold, and you just have a murderer's row to start the season. Now, it does lighten up after that. You get some of those AFC teams, the Colts, Jaguars, Titans, that could be mid by the time we get to that point, and then they have a 3-game homestand. Was it against the Falcons, Cardinals, and Colts? So thankfully, just like last year, the schedule does get better, at least the way that we look at those teams now. But it's really kind of shitty that we're going to have a quarterback question mark. And then on top of that, you have through week 8, so almost half the season, no rest for the wicked. All of these opponents are eyeing the postseason with the exception of the Giants. But that's week 1 in New York, and their defensive line, if you've watched Hard Knocks, is ferocious per personnel. Those are Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and now Brian Burns. Yeah, we got to worry about them week 1. So the schedule is difficult out of the gate, and that's a problem. Number 2 for me, broken record, is defensive tackle, the position next to Harrison Phillips, who I think we define as the nose tackle. That was basically ignored unless you have giant plans for Jerry Tillery. He was the solution, the kind of the half-assed one. Maybe he shows up and does well. I don't know that he will. He was decent last year. He had a 68, 69 PFF score. But the free agent period plus the draft, this was the offseason to finally go land an impact defensive tackle, the 3-technique spot. We haven't had one of those since Kevin Williams left, and he left in 2013. So right now, there's going to be a lot of guys battling for the spot next to Harrison Phillips, and that's Jerry Tillery, Jonathan Bullard, Jonah Williams, James Lynch, Jaquelin Roy, Redmond, the UFL guy, and then the prospect ex Levi Drake Rodriguez. So there's tons of competition. But this to me feels like our offensive guard chats from 2020 and 2021, where you want somebody to realize you can fix this. You can go out. This is somewhat easy to fix. All you have to do is sign a guy, spend a little money. There was 10 guys in free agency that they could have signed who were better than Tillery. Would have been a little bit more expensive. But if you look at the ledger right now, the Vikings have $26 million in cap space. I wonder why they weren't able to lure Eric Armstead to Minneapolis, or Maurice Hurst was really cheap on the Browns, and he's a pretty good football player. So for a umpteenth straight offseason, defensive tackle was kind of glossed over. You might recall the run on all of those in round 2 of the draft, where it was like, oh, we're not getting any of those. Was it Jerzon Newton? Oh, man, there was a bunch of them. There was about 5 defensive tackles that would have tickled your fancy and think, all right, sweet, this guy can mature and develop. But we got Jerry Tillery, so we're going to hope for the best. If they keep Brian Flores next year, hopefully, and then they don't draft one, and then they run it back with Jonathan Bullard again, I will be convinced that Brian Flores just really doesn't care about that spot. For better or for worse, he's like, we got our edges, we got Josh Metellus all over the place. But it's odd to me and problematic that they did not get the memo about defensive tackle, because this free agency was really the time to do it. All right, and the last one is Captain Obvious. The top problem facing the Vikings is quarterback mystery. I just gave the big speech about Sam Darnold and turnovers being the QB1, we think, of a team that is really turnover dependent. That's part of the mystery, whether or not Darnold is any good. And then it's twofold. It's whether or not McCarthy, when he does play, if he's going to be good. We think in this honeymoon period that the guy has all of the traits and intangibles. He's wonderful in third down and clutch situations. We think he can be the guy. But the biggest problem facing the Vikings right now, unlike the past 6 seasons, is we have no idea whatsoever to expect a quarterback. Sam Darnold could show up and throw for 4,200 yards and 33 touchdowns and 10 picks, and we're like, this makes sense because he finally has all these weapons around him. J.J. McCarthy could take the baton sooner than we think. And then we're like, well, yeah, he's really good. This makes sense. He was a winner at Michigan. Kevin O'Connell has groomed this guy. But until we see that unfold, this is the old way of Vikings football, the pre-Kirk Cousins way, where we're just kind of hoping that a journeyman catches fire and then a rookie comes in behind him, and then we finally get our first organically drafted franchise quarterback since Dante Culpepper. Teddy Bridgewater was decent for a year, and then he got hurt, and the rest is awful history there. But the Vikings are really due for a rookie quarterback to pan out. But until we get a verdict, the biggest problem facing the Vikings, as we are about 50 days from the regular season, is whether or not any of the quarterbacks, Sam Darnold, J.J. McCarthy, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, any of them will be any good. So that's what I got. I promise that soon I'll do a show that uplifts the optimism part. I am not pessimistic about these Vikings. I still think they're probably going to be a 7-10 or 8-9 team. Would love to be surprised by 10-7 or something like that. All right, we'll be back probably tomorrow night with Brevin Bain on our Saturday night spot, and then we'll get back on a more daily routine now that we've kind of got out of that drought of the NFL content calendar. Have a wonderful weekend. Skol, baby.